Singapore's solid port infrastructure is one reason why it has landed in fourth place on an index that ranks commodities trading hubs. The nation has moved up 3 spots from the 2022 report thanks to factors such as low tariffs from trading partners and good logistics infrastructure. So for more, I'm joined by Feryal Ahmadi, and she's Chief Operating Officer at the Dubai Multi Commodities Centre, and that's a commodities exchange and free trade zone in the United Arab Emirates. Thank you very much, Ms. Feryal, for joining me this evening. So how has Singapore fared in comparison to other countries on the index? We know it has moved up its spot since 2022, but what sets our performance apart from others in the region?
So first of all, let me start by saying that Singapore is an extremely significant trade hub globally. And we normally do this assessment of commodity trade index in every future of trade report that we issue biannually. And we assess 3 different factors, which is location, looking at commodity proximity to commodity markets around the world. We look at commodity endowment, as well as institutional factors such as logistics, infrastructure, and so forth. And for 2024, the US has continued to rank the first position, followed by the United Arab Emirates and Switzerland. And Singapore has come at a strong 4th position, which has ranked 3 points higher basically compared to 2022. And it's majorly due to its strong institutional factors, where it ranked very high in its FTA, in its lower tariffs that has imposed, and a lot of digital services that has also introduced throughout its operations and mainly its ports business.
Right. So, one of the case studies raised in your report is Singapore's port operator PSA and its use of AI and automation. How is AI set to revolutionize trade? How is that set to change trade, especially in Southeast Asia?
So AI is set to be a transformative factor for future of trade in the next decade. It's set to add almost $15 trillion to global trade by 2030. Now, it is still at its infancy, I can say. We don't have that many solid examples in terms of how it can actually transform business, but Singapore yet again ranks amongst the pioneers in terms of adopting AI in its ports operations. We see vessel clearances, we see a lot of preventative maintenance, a lot of digital clearances through customs and so forth that Singapore has adopted, and that has reduced almost 100,000 man-hours of operations in Singapore ports, and that is basically phenomenal and a test case that we can definitely rely on when we are looking at the impacts of AI and technology.
Right. Now, speaking of this vessel clearance, we also see that Singapore is facing very strong berth demand in recent months, and also the ongoing geopolitical uncertainties are also causing, we know, that congestion. We just had that story earlier. How will such disruptions to supply chains affect Singapore in the short and long term?
So Singapore is certainly not isolated from the world, and we see geopolitical tensions and macroeconomic impacts throughout the world as we speak. I mean, the China-US rivalry is ramping up day by day. You see about 80 countries around the world going into elections this year. That's almost half of the world population. There are 2 open and very serious conflicts in both the Middle East and Europe. All of those have the tendency to increase protectionism, increase more of, I can say, protectionism, and increase regionalism as well. So we are moving away from the global era and more into bilateral agreements. And Singapore has also led that in terms of looking more at friend-shoring versus globalization, because nations are now moving away from the unpredictability of the global scene that's basically due to geopolitics. So regionalization is definitely a shift that majority of nations are looking towards to protect them against the uncertainty in the global scene.
So very quickly, Ms. Feryal, I want to speak about agreements. We also know that trade agreements, they include now the provisions on environment as well. How how will this climate policy shape the future of trade? Is it even feasible or realistic to have such provisions?
Certainly. I mean, if you would have asked this question, let's say 10 years ago, everyone would assume that it's probably a good to have, a nice to have topic. But nowadays, it's very much a must. I mean, you see the extreme weather impact on supply chains, the shock waves that sends through cargo rerouting, and how that actually gets impacted through higher prices of commodities due to this change. So businesses are moving more towards resilience more than cost cutting or efficiency, and they want to move away from areas that are impacted by climate change as well as geopolitics and protectionism at the same time. So you do see definitely the rise of carbon neutral initiatives, the rise of environmentally sustainable technologies, and the Middle East, for example, is pioneering that with the abundance of energy reserves in the Middle East. They are very well primed to actually lead the way when it comes to renewables and the sustainable space. Dubai in particular is one of the top 10 hubs in trade of environmentally sustainable technologies. As we speak, China, for example, is producing almost 70% of the world's graphite. That is what is used in electric vehicle batteries, as well as semiconductors, which is critical for green transition and green technologies as well.
Right, so this climate policy conversation is a definite must-have. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to me this evening. And I've been speaking with Ms. Feryal Ahmadi, Chief Operating Officer at the Dubai Multi Commodities Centre.